Yeah, we are live, and I'm talking to Anthony Samsel, Deerfield, New Hampshire in USA, and he has just had his fifth paper published on glyphosate and how it leads to the pathways to all kinds of diseases. Good afternoon, Anthony.
Good afternoon, Tony.
So
go ahead and tell me
about this paper on glyphosate that has just been published by you and Stephanie Seneff, the fifth version. What do you have to say?
That paper is titled Glyphosate Herbicide Pathways to Modern Diseases, Synthetic Amino Acid and Analog of Glycine, Misincorporation into Diverse Proteins. And that's our fifth paper. And it's a very unique paper because it presents something that from before this paper was not known about glyphosate. It's something that the EPA did not know. It's something Monsanto didn't know. And it explains how glyphosate works. Glyphosate, as Monsanto suggests, is relatively non-toxic. And we've seen so much about the toxicity of glyphosate that we don't realize that it is, like Monsanto says, it's relatively non-toxic. Compared to glycine, which is one of our canonical amino acids, they're pretty close in toxicity. Our canonical amino acid, glycine, at around 7,930 milligrams per kilogram is toxic. That's the LD50. That's where half the animals in the experiments would die if they were given that much glycine. Well, with glyphosate, you would have to give the rats 5,600 milligrams of glyphosate per kilogram of body weight of the animal to kill them. So you can see that the relative toxicities are not too far off. So as Monsanto says, glyphosate is relatively non-toxic. But how does glyphosate cause disease? Why is glyphosate bad? Well, what was not realized prior to this paper is what we discussed last fall, I think it was. You and I had a discussion about glyphosate being a synthetic amino acid. And that's how glyphosate causes problems in all biology. Glyphosate misincorporates in place of the amino acid glycine, our simplest amino acid. It misincorporates and becomes part of proteins. And when it does that, it forms misfolded proteins. It forms proteins that are different than our natural proteins. So that's what this fifth paper is all about. It's about glyphosate as a pathway to disease, forming and misincorporating into diverse proteins and causing problems. And from this aspect, this is how glyphosate functions.
Okay, can I ask you one question from a
Sure.
non-scientist point of view? Glycine, being an essential amino acid, often called one of the building blocks of life, I suppose you agree?
Glycine isn't actually an essential amino acid. We can recycle glycine. We get that from food. It's not like the other essential amino acids that we have to get from food, like phenylalanine, tyrosine, methionine, tryptophan. Those our body can't make. We can't synthesize those.
I understand, but whichever way it comes, whether the body can make or we have to get it from outside, it is part of a building block of life, right? That means our biology is constructed with X number of amino acid, and glycine is an important part of that, right?
Yes, glycine is a very important amino acid. It comprises probably about I think it's around 25% of our biology. It's the smallest amino acid, and it's the amino acid that gives us the curves in our skin, facial features. It's because it's small. It can be incorporated where there are tight turns to be made.
Okay.
So
again, just to understand, when you say that it's when we say that it's 25% of our biology, by our, do we mean only humans or only one kind of animals or all animals from bacteria onwards? How many kinds of living creatures is this glycine so important for?
Okay, glycine is important to all life. Everything on this planet, every living thing on this planet is dependent on the structural building blocks, the basic 2021 amino acids. So glycine is involved in all life, in bacteria. It's involved in other types of animals, in us, in plants,
okay.
fungi, what have you. There's glycine in everything.
Okay, so I got that. And then in different animals, this glycine is producing important proteins that those plants require, even if those are not exactly same as we require, and that programming is done by some other system, but glycine is an important tool for creating all those things like you mentioned, right? And therefore it hurts everything. Not glycine, if something is replacing glycine, that hurts every living creature.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
We are all connected. In the biosphere, everything is connected. We are all connected. What affects one affects all. So when you take a synthetic amino acid like glyphosate and incorporate it into biology, the effects are astronomical. The effects that it causes, and this is how glyphosate can cause the rise in all of the modern diseases that we've seen, because glyphosate, when it misincorporates into protein structure, it alters the protein structure. It causes misfolded proteins that are dysfunctional, that don't behave like our normal proteins that are built with our canonical amino acids. So this is a real problem. In the second slide, it shows the mechanisms of glyphosate associated with morbidity and disease and mortality. Glyphosate disrupts life at the most fundamental level because it's a basic amino acid. Misincorporation into peptides and proteins happens with glyphosate. Glyphosate disrupts enzymes and their functions. It disrupts hormones like serotonin, testosterone, thyroid hormone. It disrupts bacterial symbiosis, the balance of the species of bacteria on and within us get disrupted by glyphosate, because with some it serves as an herbicide and actually kills the more sensitive species. Glyphosate also disrupts the amino acid biosynthesis of our aromatic amino acids, phenylalanine, tyrosine, and tryptophan, but also our sulfur amino acid, methionine. It also disrupts production of vitamins like our B12 and B6 and B9, these essential B vitamins, and also other biomolecules are disrupted because of glyphosate. Glyphosate also destroys every gland and organ in the body. And Monsanto found this in the research that they did with mice and rats. If we go to the third slide, this is Monsanto's long-term trade secret studies in mice and rats revealed that glyphosate destroys the tissues, glands, and organs. Tissue destruction leads to gland and organ dysfunction and failure. The effect of glyphosate misincorporation into diverse proteins leads to disease by misfolded proteins. Now, some of these diseases include Alzheimer's disease, the ASD diseases, which are the autism spectrum disorder diseases, Parkinson's, and all the neurological diseases, obesity, diabetes, cataracts, chronic kidney disease, celiac disease, liver disease, destruction of the teeth, destruction of the bones, lung disease, asthma, deterioration of the joints, and other defects, infertility, sterility, sexual disorders, skin disorders like scleroderma, which is a collagen disease of collagen, cancer, lack of vitamins. All these things can and are caused by glyphosate misincorporation into proteins. Now, if we move to the next slide, back another one. As we said,
this is the fourth one or the fifth one?
The fourth one.
Okay.
Glyphosate is a synthetic amino acid. Yeah. It is a structural analog of our canonical amino acid glycine. It's not found in nature. It was created in a laboratory. It's a synthetic and non-coding amino acid capable of misincorporation into peptides and proteins. Glyphosate forms peptoids due to its structure, and like peptides, can be incorporated into proteins, changing their function. The next slide is shows our 21 amino acids. These are the building blocks of biology. They determine protein folding, structure, and function. Outside of proteins, amino acids, particularly glycine and glutamine or glutamate, act as neurotransmitters in our biology, as well as participate in biosynthesis.
Can I interrupt you for another question?
Sure.
Glyphosate and glycine both are molecules, is that right?
Yes, they're molecules.
Okay, so when they are part of life, as we say, is it in the cellular level or what?
It's at the molecular level.
But it is one molecule, and of course the biology is filled with many other molecules. It's not the only one. So
yes.
how
and when glycine forms proteins with like proline and serine and alanine, what happens is our DNA, the DNA of all living things, produces a template, which is RNA. Yeah. And the RNA selects the amino acids to incorporate in order to form the various proteins.
Which should go where? Which should go where? To replace old cells or to make new cells or to do what? Because body already has the proteins.
The body produces the proteins.
Yeah.
From the food that we eat. It's absorbed. The amino acids get circulated in the bloodstream, and from the bloodstream, it winds up in the capillaries, and it reaches the end of the line, the capillaries, and nerve endings, end in the extracellular matrix. The extracellular matrix this is proteinaceous material that surrounds all of our cells, and it provides structure and elasticity for our organs and tissues and our skin, which is our largest organ. And the construct of everything in our being is of different combinations of glycine and the other amino acids.
Yeah, I get that. But since
specific function.
Yeah, but since you are already fully formed humans, for example, why do we need more proteins since we already have them? So that means we need to replace something all the time, or what?
Yes, cells are constantly being replaced. They don't, they're changing every, so many, whatever the time function is for the specific organ or whatever. Some may last years, some may last shorter periods of time, whatever. But our cells are being replaced and replenished.
And that is when it needs fresh glycine all the time.
Yeah, the amino acids wind up in the extracellular matrix.
Right. Okay.
And then they are transported across the cell membrane, one molecule at a time, by amino acid transporters. Each molecule is transported across the cell membrane into the cell, and then that's where our RNA picks up and structures them, orders them into a particular sequence, and then they're excreted by the cell to form extracellular matrix around the new cell that has divided and formed. I
got it.
Okay, so now the importance of the extracellular matrix we'll get to very, very shortly, but the extracellular matrix is not just the structure that surrounds our cells. In the space of the extracellular matrix, there are functions and controls that control our mitochondria within the cell. The mitochondria within the cell are being influenced by what's outside of the cell in the extracellular matrix. So what happens in the extracellular matrix is extremely important to our biology. Now, when glyphosate enters our biology, when we ingest it, inhale it, absorb it through our skin, it winds up in the bloodstream. Now, Monsanto found that glyphosate from ingestion was well absorbed. They found that about 30% of glyphosate remains circulating in our biology, in our bloodstream. The beta half-life was 7 to 14 days. Now, where did it go from there? Although they showed that the majority of glyphosate was excreted in the feces and the urine, there was about 1% that was absorbed and bioaccumulated into the tissues. Now, they learned this because they radio-labeled the glyphosate. They radio-labeled the carbon atoms in the glyphosate so that they could follow where it went into the tissues. And they found that it went into all tissues of the animal. Went into the brain, went into the bones, the marrow, the blood cells. It went into everything. And why did it go into everything? Because it is an analog of glycine.
Can you say what is an analog? Can we say it's a mimic for a common person?
Yeah, you could say that it has a similar backbone structure. So if you look at glycine and you see its two carbon atoms, and off of the first carbon atom, you see that there is a carboxyl group. It's oxygen and hydroxyl off that carbon atom. Then you'll see that off the main carbon atom, there is an amine, NH2 group, and that's glycine. That's a molecule of glycine. Now, if we look at glyphosate, glyphosate has a methylphosphonate group attached to the amine nitrogen, and that side group is what makes it an analog of glycine. In other words, you have the basic glycine backbone structure, but then you have a side group, a side chain. So you can change up that side chain to all kinds of combinations and come up with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of glycine analogs. As a matter of fact, Monsanto found and identified hundreds of glycine analogs in their research, but they only found that glyphosate, the N-phosphonomethylglycine, made a fabulous herbicide, and that's why they pursued this as a product. But what they didn't realize is that this molecule, N-phosphonomethylglycine, glyphosate, is an amino acid that could substitute and misincorporate in our biology for our amino acid glycine, and in so doing cause misfolded proteins. And when you cause misfolded proteins, that leads to dysfunction and disease. Now,
that is how it causes disease in us, but that's not how it kills plants, or does it?
Well, it kills plants by disrupting the shikimate pathway.
Uh-huh.
That's one way that it kills plants. There are other ways that it causes dysfunction.
Okay.
But the main way that it causes dysfunction is through disrupting the shikimate pathway, and that pathway is responsible for the production of aromatic amino acids.
For both plants and bacteria?
In both.
Oh, okay.
In plants and bacteria.
Okay.
It disrupts the shikimate pathway, and when you don't have these aromatic amino acids, the plant suffers and dies. And the same with sensitive species of bacteria, this happens also. Now, how do we know that glyphosate becomes part of proteins? You've asked me this question before, and there are other people that question whether or not glyphosate actually becomes part of the protein. Well, first of all, we look at Monsanto's radiolabel studies. We see that it goes into all tissues. It's found primarily from a radiolabel dose. It was found primarily bioaccumulated in bone.
Yes.
Bone has a high degree of glycine. So glyphosate's misincorporation into bone is significant. One of the primary materials of construction of the extracellular matrix and of our bones is collagen. And there are like 27 different kinds of collagen. But it's the first several types of collagen that are the main collagens for the construct of our tissues and our bone. Now, in collagen, if we extract gelatin from collagen, we can see that glyphosate has become part of the collagen that makes up the bones. Now, I've done that in the lab. I've analyzed collagens from pig skin, pig bones, bovine or cow bones, and I've looked at the structure of the bones and the gelatins. Now, the only way that glyphosate can become part of collagen, which is the major construct of the extracellular matrix and our bones and whatnot, the only way that glyphosate can become part of the proteins that make collagen is, I'll explain the journey. You eat the food that's contaminated with glyphosate, it's passed from the digestive tract, the amino acid, synthetic amino acid glyphosate winds up in the bloodstream. We follow this to all the tissues. The end of the line is the end of the capillaries, which end in the extracellular matrix. From the extracellular matrix, each molecule that's used and misincorporated into collagen goes across the membrane wall into the cell, where the RNA grab it as glycine and misincorporate it into collagen. And the collagen is excreted by the cell and utilized in bone, in the extracellular matrix, in whatever needs collagen. So the only way glyphosate can get into collagen is if it's ordered by our RNA and excreted from the cell as part of the protein.
That brings us to the end of this part of the interview. The interview is pretty long and covers a lot of ground, but here you get the proof from Anthony Samsel of how exactly glyphosate is picked up by the body and how our RNA mistakenly uses it thinking it's glycine and then puts it in all parts of our biology where instead of working like glycine should, this glyphosate causes all kinds of defective proteins, and that can trigger all kinds of illnesses and problems in all animals, including humans. This part is ending now, but there is more to it, so hang on. So the future parts, he will provide further proof that this evidence that glyphosate is being picked up all over is already there in the tests conducted by the producers such as Monsanto and DuPont. So why did Monsanto and DuPont and others didn't find out that glyphosate is dangerous? They didn't find out because they were not looking for this information. They were looking for wrong kind of information in the wrong places, and basically all this glaring evidence that glyphosate is dangerous in a different way, not because of toxicity, but because it invades our biology in place of glycine. This part was completely ignored by these people and brought to light by Anthony Samsel. There is one more thing. There is also the issue of vaccines, and vaccines uses animal products such as eggs from chicken and what do you call gelatin and so on, and these are also having glyphosate as a contaminant. Why? Because the animals from which these byproducts are taken by these vaccine makers, those animals were themselves probably factory farmed, fed with GMO and glyphosate-laced food, which just like us, those animals picked it up. It went everywhere, including in their eggs and in the gelatin that they produced, and that in turn got into the vaccines. So now the vaccines are contaminated with glyphosate, and therefore whoever is vaccinated, if that glyphosate gets picked up by that person, then it can also trigger all kinds of diseases. And this is what was found by Anthony Samsel, not as a speculation. He actually got the vaccines tested in lab for presence of glyphosate and found it out, and now that letter is going all over the place to the authorities in USA and in United Nations everywhere, and there's more to it. So hang on, there is more to come.